He achieved his fellowship in the AGD in 1980 and now is a life member. He enjoyed a preventive-oriented dental practice in Beamsville, Ontario for 43 years and is retired from active practice in 2014, and he now focuses on dental research.
Advance.
Dr. Southward has published articles on preventive dentistry, nutrition, periodontics, and the systemic nature of dental caries. Please give a welcome to Dr. Ken Southward.
Well, greetings, and I guess I should name the disclaimer too, that I have no financial interest in any of the things that we'll talk about. The topic, of course, is a systemic theory of dental caries and the role of vitamin K2 and why this is relevant to oral medicine and toxicology. For every movie you see, there's a trailer. You know, it gives you a little preview, some highlights and things like that. The last article I published in 2015, which is the one Rich Fisher saw and invited me, published online, gives you the opportunity to do a little 5-minute author's presentation. So I'm going to show that to you. It's in layman's language. The first slide you'll see is the URL for it. The article is published, it's open access, you can get the whole thing, but for any of your friends or your patients, clients, it would be a little too deep. But the trailer is pretty good. So there's the URL, and I guess you get that on your little app thing when the slides are there. But we're going to go on, and here is the... Okay. Get my mouse on this like Dave told me to do.
There is presently considerable interest in determining links between oral and systemic diseases, such as periodontal disease and diabetes. As periodontal disease moves from the controlled, reversible level, known as gingivitis, to the uncontrolled level, irreversible tissue destruction by the body's own enzymes becomes evident. While this inflammatory process is mainstream understanding in periodontal disciplines, it has not been applied to dental caries. The traditional acid theory of dental caries recognizes tooth destruction due to caries as a bacterial acid process, which is driven by specific oral bacteria being fed a sugar diet. Treating dental caries through restorative means has become quite sophisticated. Efforts to prevent the caries process, however, have fallen short because they are not treating the cause, but merely the oral symptoms. The systemic theory of dental caries recognizes tooth destruction of dental caries is a similar process to the tissue destruction of periodontal disease. Caries is not a unique oral disease, but another example of irreversible inflammatory breakdown by the body's own enzymes due to an acid irritant. A tooth is well designed to withstand a harsh oral environment if it is healthy. Tooth vulnerability begins in the hypothalamus of the brain. Through an endocrine process linked with the parotid gland, the normal cleansing and nourishing centrifugal dentinal fluid flow through the tooth is halted or reversed. Figuratively, a healthy tooth sweats and a vulnerable tooth acts more like a sponge. The significance of this cannot be underestimated. It means that future progress in dental caries prevention will come from the fields of endocrinology and neuroscience rather than from dental research focusing orally. Understanding the systemic nature of dental caries is the first part of the problem. How to manage the process is the second part. For progress in this area, we need to turn to the field of nutrition rather than pharmacology. K2, or Menaquinone, is a fat-soluble vitamin that has recently been recognized for its significance in working in concert with calcium and vitamins A and D. It may prove to be a keystone nutrient in brain chemistry by serving as an antioxidant. Its contribution is already being recognized in the fields of diabetes, cardiovascular disease, and osteoporosis. Based on this systemic paradigm, nutritionists can play a key role in furthering dental caries prevention. Working closely with preventively oriented dentists could be an emerging field. The third aspect of this new paradigm is the question of who will promote it to the public. One option is public health dental teams, who are always seeking new approaches to the ongoing dilemma of dental caries. Previous efforts have been frustrating, especially regarding early childhood caries. Future research and application of this systemic paradigm will provide opportunities well beyond traditional dentistry. Endocrinology, neuroscience, nutrition, public health, and preventively oriented dental teams will be disciplines with the greatest potential to affect change. Focusing on the systemic cause of dental disease rather than treating the oral symptoms could make a significant impact on the future of dental health.
Well, now you've got everything, you can go home. All right, well, first of all, you really see immediately that the process of enamel erosion or demineralization and dentin caries are two very different processes. Evidence-based dentistry says, well, show us the evidence. Well, show us the evidence that acid is the cause. For example, not all acids are equal. If someone is sucking on lemons, do we see demineralization and erosion of their enamel? Yes, we do. Do we see caries? No, we don't. If someone is bulimic or has gastroesophageal reflux disorder, do we see caries? No, we see a specific erosion of the palatal side of the upper teeth. However, when someone's drinking soda pop, with or without sugar, do we see caries? Yes, we do. When someone has plaque on their teeth, and that plaque is putting acids into the enamel, do we see caries? Yes, we do. So, what is the difference? The dentin caries process, however, is accomplished by an inflammatory reaction involving the body's own matrix metalloproteinases, or MMPs. This is similar to periodontal disease. So if you say, well, show me that this is an inflammatory reaction. And right away you could say, well, have you ever been able to produce dentin caries in the lab? No. And why does dentin caries stop immediately upon death of the host? Because there is no more inflammatory reaction. I always think in terms of visuals, like a road map. If I wanted to go from A to B, I take out a map, I get a little visual on where to go, and I find that to explain inflammation, a little visual or a schematic is most helpful to me, and I hope it will be to you too. So I developed 5 equations to help explain this. The first equation, the health equation, is endogenous, or in the body, oxidation, equals endogenous antioxidation. And we heard these terms earlier. Endogenous oxidation is we have a basal metabolic rate. It helps our heart go, it helps us think, it keeps our body warm, respiration, things like that. And in that cycle of energy production, there's some little free radicals, as they were called, they're reactive oxygen species, spit out as an exhaust of that energy production cycle, because it's not perfect. We called them reactive oxygen species here because these are. Now here's a point, and Boyd referred to it earlier. A reactive oxygen species is a free radical. But not all free radicals are oxygen. You can have nitrogen-free radicals and everything else. So if we were talking specifically in the cell, we would refer to reactive oxygen species. But since we're talking about toxicology, I'm going to use the term free radicals. So when they're equal, happy, healthy. Okay, then we get on to the endogenous dis-ease equation. So we're still talking in the body. Now this could be a situation where you increase your exercise level. Okay, so got to produce more energy, more free radical exhaust going off, and it overwhelms the endogenous antioxidants in the body. Things like glutathione that Boyd referred to, catalase, superoxide dismutase, they're overwhelmed. And the difference between the oxidation and the antioxidation, that difference is the amount of oxidative stress that there is. And to cope with that oxidative stress, the body uses inflammation to cope with that. All right? So two ways of balancing things. Either you can lower the oxidant side, or you can increase the antioxidant side. Now, at the bottom, I apologize, Scott, I didn't know. Here's a quote from Wikipedia. Isn't it interesting? You learn a lot of things here about all this. Oxidative stress reflects an imbalance between the systemic manifestation of reactive oxygen species and a biological system's ability to readily detoxify the reactive intermediates or to repair the resulting damage. So anyway, from Wikipedia, I'm sorry, Scott, but there we go. Okay, now to link this to toxicology, I thought, well, let's go to one of the some of the reviews on toxicology. I didn't know Boyd at the time. I probably could have got this quote from him. But this review, this is a direct quote, word for word, out of a review in 2008. This review summarizes our current understanding about the mechanism by which metalloids, or heavy metals, particularly arsenic, lead, cadmium, and mercury, induce their toxic effects. Isn't that what we've been talking about? The unifying factor in determining toxicity and carcinogenicity for all these metals is the generation of reactive oxygen and nitrogen species. The toxic manifestations of these metals are caused primarily due to imbalance between pro-oxidant and antioxidant homeostasis, which is termed as oxidative stress. So as we go on, the inflammation map, now we're on the third equation, the expanded health equation. Now we're going to include outside the body oxidation, and we're going to include exogenous or outside the body antioxidation. All right? So let's say, for example, that you got some exogenous antioxidation, or oxidation, sorry. Could be an amalgam filling. It could be you came down to Florida, got a little too much sun or whatever. But you're eating lots of tropical and fresh and brightly colored fruits and vegetables. You're taking some supplements. And so you got a real high antioxidant intake, and it balances out. It's happy. Doesn't say these things are good. It just means they're tolerable in your system. Maybe not everybody's system, but in yours they would be. And it's happy and healthy. Now we expand it to the dis-ease equation, where we've got endogenous and exogenous oxidation is greater than the endo and exo antioxidation. We get oxidative stress, and we get controlled inflammation. So let's say your family came to Florida a few days early, and lo and behold, you got too much sun. And to cope with the radiation exposure from the sun, you got a sunburn, inflammation, redness, heat, swelling, and pain, inflammation. So what do? You can stay out of the sun, lower the oxidant side, or you might pump up that fresh squeezed Florida orange juice and increase your antioxidant side. But the fact is, this is controlled inflammation. As soon as you put the fire out, the firemen go away, and it returns to a normal, healthy situation. The damage was totally repaired. Now let's go on to number 5, the disease equation. Now we have usually a more chronic situation. Once again, oxidation is overweighing the antioxidation, but it's going on year after year. Now, this is a mouthful of mercury, for example. And we get breakdown in irreversible ways. So if you get chronic plaque sitting on your teeth, then we have a situation where you have a chronic oxidant, and you'll get decay, and it goes on. So I really enjoyed Dr. Marshall Vega's presentation this morning, because when he was using EDTA, which side of the equation is he working on? He's working on lowering the oxidant side, getting that out of the body. When he was talking about using vitamin C, IV, he's talking about increasing the antioxidant side. It's all about balancing that equation. Back to the tooth. And here I have to recognize Dr. Pinto as having such a recognition for Ralph Steinman, because Ralph was the one that pointed out that all bodies, we know, all tissues of the body need nourishment. And they either use a blood supply to do that, like the pulp of the tooth, or they use a fluid flow through the non-vascular tissues, such as dentin. So Dr. Steinman, working in concert with Dr. John Leonora at Loma Linda, pointed out that there is a centrifugal fluid flow through the tooth, as you saw in the little video in the trailer. Okay? So virtually a healthy tooth is sweating. Well, bacteria have difficulty landing on the surface of a tooth. They're constantly pushing it away. Bacteria produce the acids, and the tooth says, I don't want that. I don't need that. Okay? But you start to reverse the fluid flow, and suddenly those bacteria stick to the surface of the tooth. And all that acid gets sucked in, demineralizes the enamel, continues on deeper in the tooth, irritates the dentin, sets off an inflammatory reaction, which then causes either a controlled inflammation, such as sensitivity, or an uncontrolled situation, which is breakdown of the dentin, irreversible, just like we have with periodontal disease. We know that it's not the bacterial toxins that break down the periodontal tissues. It's their irritation causing the body's own matrix metalloproteinases to break down the periodontal tissues. So once again, figure it'll be a healthy tooth sweats, and a vulnerable tooth is more like a sponge. So fortunately, Dr. Steinman was working with Dr. Leonora. I say fortunately because Leonora wasn't a dentist, he was an endocrinologist. So he said, well, if they've got this fluid flow through the tooth, Ralph, there must be something controlling it. They had done these studies, and they'd found that, they got the fluid flow. They looked at dye penetration in the dentin, and then they fed the rats and later on pigs high sucrose diets, and they found that fluid flow, the dye penetration stopped. It wouldn't penetrate. They measured the caries rates in the rats and found significant differences. when that was happening and thought, oh great, okay, but what is the controlling part here? So Leonora was the one who guided the research on that to determine the hypothalamus of the brain was sending signals to the parotid gland. What? How many people here in dental school learned that the parotid gland is a dual function gland, just like the pancreas? I didn't. University of Toronto didn't teach that. The pancreas has two functions. First, it excretes digestive enzymes into the digestive system. The other endocrine function is the islet cells secrete insulin into the bloodstream. The parotid gland is also a dual function gland. Should point out, not the submandibular gland, only the parotid glands. Exocrine function is saliva into the mouth. Endocrine function is parotid hormone into the bloodstream, which then drives the fluid flow through the tooth. Now, it doesn't end there, because they were doing other research and they realized that if they fed a high sugar diet, sure enough, within minutes, the fluid flow would stop or reverse, but they could manipulate it. They would inject carbamyl phosphate into the rat at the same time, and the fluid flow would continue, even in a high sucrose diet. They also recognized that if they fed the rat or the pigs eggshells, that it kept on going, and small amounts of zinc as well. They couldn't figure out what they took the minerals out of eggshells, calcium and magnesium, phosphorus, whatever. They provided that in the diet. No change. It wouldn't. The fluid flow would stop. Couldn't figure it out. And in about 2007, I think, Loma Linda published all the research findings of Steinman and Leonora, and in the foreword to that book, John Leonora said, the unfortunate part is we knew that would all happen, but we were never able to explain why. So if you can't explain why, really, the research doesn't go any further, because nobody else can explain why either. So, 2 breakthrough studies. I'm researching all this. I'm a big believer in Steinman and Leonora and all that, and I can't figure out why either. Then I came across an epiphany. I'm researching some diabetic research coming out of France. Corinne Leloup in France published an article that said that they had found that reactive oxygen species produced in the hypothalamus were controlling the insulin being injected into the system. That was it. Suddenly, reactive oxygen species are no longer just the exhaust of the energy production cycle. These are the critical signaling device. They are the canary in the mine shaft. So as soon as the body said, the hypothalamus said, whoa boy, we got blood sugar going up, all hands on deck, we need insulin. To pay Paul, you got to rob Peter. So what's it saying? It says, well, all that parotid hormone stimulating factor that I was producing, I don't have time to do that now. So don't do that anymore. We need insulin. So no more parotid stimulating hormone, no more parotid hormone, no more fluid flow through the tooth, and Dentin Caries starts, or the Caries process starts. So these are the 2 things, that reactive oxygen species aren't just the exhaust, they're the signals, and that they are the triggers for the parotid hormone by the hypothalamus. So, direction, stops or reverse the fluid flow. Covered that one. Okay. So what did dentists see? First of all, when you realize it, we're already 2 stages into the caries process. First of all, the signal to decrease parotid hormone. Step 2, reversing the fluid flow. Enter our traditional dentist. We've already got a vulnerable tooth or a healthy tooth, and we see enamel demineralization caused by acid as plaque adheres to the tooth surface. And so virtually all preventive efforts are focused on enamel remineralization after the demineralization process has taken place. So we're treating the symptoms and neglecting the cause. But this is only stage 3 of the process. And whereas Miller's theory holds water here in stage 3, it holds no credence at all in stage 1 and stage 2. So now we get into the dentin part of the tooth. And again, the acid theory falls apart because now we have controlled and uncontrolled inflammation caused by the acid irritants, begin the dentin process by the body's own matrix metalloproteinases. There's a number of MMPs. The 2 significant ones for dentin caries are MMP number 8, which is collagenase, and number 9, which is gelatinase. And they break down the dentin portion of the tooth. So why acids from carbohydrate-consuming oral bacteria are the most devastating? First of all, it's because the endocrine portion of the system has been engaged. You see, the acid from the lemon didn't cause the fluid flow to stop. And bulimia and GERD didn't cause the fluid flow to stop. But sugar and aspartame produce a number of free radicals in the hypothalamus that then create the vulnerability in the tooth. Meth mouth, crystal methamphetamine. We look at it, we say, oh, God, this is a mess. Why is it different? Well, we know that there's a lot of caries and we can't control it. We think it's because these people just don't care. Well, that's not it at all. Crystal meth is causing a hurricane of free radicals in the hypothalamus, which has totally shut down the fluid flow and make them totally susceptible to any kind of acid. Any kind of acid. Cigarettes, same thing, storm of free radicals. Then there's the Asian paradox, where they did a study with Asian men who were smoking like chimneys, but they were also drinking a lot of green tea. And they found out that they should have a lot of cardiovascular problems. And they didn't. They should have a lot of periodontal problems, but they didn't. And they should have a lot of dental caries, but they didn't. So then the dentist said, well, it's probably because of the fluoride in the green tea. David Kennedy will be happy to hear this. They took the fluoride out as a confounding factor, and it was still no caries. It had nothing to do with the fluoride. So dentin caries is a normal response to a stressor. It's just a normal reaction of the body. This morning, Hans Sellier's name was mentioned. He introduced the concept of a local adaptation syndrome, or local stress, and a general adaptation syndrome. So local adaptation is gingivitis in periodontal disease. It's just handled locally or anything like that. Sensitivity in teeth, just a local sort of situation. But a general adaptation involves the endocrine system through the hypothalamus. And that's when everything's happening. You've got up-regulating of insulin, you get down-regulating of parotid hormone and that. So it would seem that toxicity, toxic metals, would seem to be the same way in terms of they trigger an endocrine response and a general adaptation syndrome is involved. So, do we have any evidence to support the role of nutrition in dental health? And here we come to an interesting man, and I'm sure everybody in this room has heard of Dr. Weston Price. He was the head American Dental Association's research chair from 1914 to 1928. This man was not new to research. And he developed the focal infection theory regarding root canals specifically. And there's virtually no one in this room who would ever want a root canal done prior to 1980. We've taken silver points out of many teeth, and oh man, it's something else. So he's quite right. And the profession has been constantly getting better and better to reduce that focal infection effect, but we're still not perfect yet, and not every tooth works out, but more and more all the time are getting there. Price published a book called Nutrition and Physical Degeneration. This should be in everyone's library, I think. It's now in its 8th edition. It's available from the Price Pottinger Nutrition Foundation at ppnf.org. In it, Dr. Price talks about all of his research. He switched from focal infection theory to nutrition and physical degeneration in the latter part of his time with the ADA, and then through the 1930s, he set out to design a randomized controlled trial. Now these are the gold standards in this. To do that, of course, you have to have a control and a comparative group. You need to minimize the confounding factors, for example, latitude, altitude, age, fluoridation, income, smoking, dental care. So many of these things all are confounding factors when you're doing this. So if you're doing a nutrition study, really the only difference should be the diet, and specifically key nutrients like vitamin K2, or the fat-soluble vitamins, D and A included. So what did he do? He went out and searched for 14 primitive groups. He wasn't looking for 14. He was looking for as many primitive groups on the cusp of civilization. Now that is important because these couldn't be just any group. These had to be groups that were part of the group was still in the control on the native diet. And we saw the native diet in Brazil earlier this morning. And the other part of the group on a civilized or modern diet. So he did. He found 14 groups. And so what he did was he measured the percentage of decayed teeth in those who were in the control group and those in the study group. Now, the following chart, I must say, is reproduced with the kind permission of the Price Pottinger Nutrition Foundation. They're very proud of them maintaining all of the documents here. So here we go. The primitive group with the Swiss was, I'm going to switch to this. Oh, I can read it here. Okay, 4.6% of the teeth were decayed in the Swiss. 29.8% were decayed in the modernized group. Here's what happened. The Loschental Valley, isolated valley in the Swiss Alps. Nobody can get in or out or anything else. It's just very rare. And you had probably 3 days to get over the mountains to get into town and all that. They grew they had their dairy cattle. They grew some oats and some ryegrass and things like that. And they had quite a good, well-rounded diet. Then they put a tunnel through to the Loschental Valley. And some of the younger people in the valley says, oh, now I can go into Zurich and the big towns and I'll be part of that. So they were the modernized group. 29.8% decay. So then he found the Gaelics. These are the people in the Outer Hebrides Islands off the west coast of Scotland. They make good things like drambuie and things like that. But the Gaelics, 1.2% decay, and then after they were modernized, 30% decay. What happened? Well, it became a whaling port. So on the one end of the island, where the port was, and ships were coming through all the time, bring their cakes and sugars and all this kind of stuff, the people in the port town had 30% decay. Those on the other ends of the islands or on the outer islands, still primitive, had 1.2%. And it goes on. The Eskimos, 0.09, 13%. Northern Indians, as soon as they put the trade routes through, then they got modernized, 21.5. Seminole Indians, they put the Tamiami Trail through the Everglades, and suddenly they've got 40% decay. Melanesians, Polynesians, Africans, all the same. Something happened that caused them to be westernized food, modernized foods to be available to them. And the degeneration in the narrowing of the arches, so now they had orthodontic problems, decay of the teeth became very, very significant. So Weston Price was trying to figure out why, and he had a lot of the foodstuffs from these primitive cultures sent back to his lab in Cleveland, Ohio. Price it was a Canadian first, and then moved down to the States. So we shipped them off to you. You can thank us for that. Okay, so he recognized that there was something going on in these foods that he didn't know what it was. He knew about vitamin D, knew about vitamin A. He could see the fats, but there was something in there that he knew was a fat soluble vitamin, and he termed it Activator X. Very similar to the problem that Steinman and Leonora had, is that Weston Price died in 1947. He never knew what Activator X was. He knew where he could find it. He knew that he could find it in butter from animals fed during the rapidly growing season, where you get the maximum chlorophyll in the grass. And they did studies in different parts of the United States, in Wisconsin, dairy capital and that. And they found out, they were measuring for Activator X, and they found, yes, June, more of it, a little more in September, cooler, wetter months, more rapidly growing grass. And, but at that time, K2 was, in 2007, a Japanese researcher called the Price Pottinger Nutrition Foundation says, I think that Activator X is vitamin K2 or Menaquinone. So they did the comparisons and they said, oh my God, it's a perfect match. So then they said, okay, well, what is K2? Well, K2, its proper name is Menaquinone. K1 is phyloquinone. We know what coenzyme Q10 is, the one involved as a coenzyme in all the energy production cycles. That's ubiquinone. All these quinones are involved in oxygen transport in the system. All those biochemical reactions that we have require those sorts of cofactors for certain stages of their completion. If you didn't have coenzyme Q10, it might kick out more free radicals. Okay? So, the odd thing is that the Europeans were researching menaquinone decades before this. So they knew what menaquinone was, but they didn't know what the physical ramifications were. Price knew what the physical ramifications were, But he didn't know that it was menaquinone. So if we'd had the internet back in the 1930s and they could have collaborated, we may be in a whole different situation today. So what is menaquinone mostly involved in? Vitamin K2, its main support, and most of the research in the Netherlands leading the way, is in cardiovascular disease and in osteoporosis. All right? So it's only new to dentistry because of this systemic theory. All right? Otherwise, K2, who cares? All right? So the relationship of K1, why was it called K2? Well, K1, as you know, is phytoquinone. It's the clotting vitamin, and we must have it. When we must have something, the body doesn't trust you to eat enough of it, so it develops a recycling process. Okay? So K1 will recycle in the body. So if you want to create, if you don't want blood to clot, blood thinners, Coumadin, warfarin, and stuff like this, what you do is you interfere with that recycling process. And then tell a person, don't eat too many green vegetables because, you know, you're going to get K1 in the diet, and that's going to defeat the purpose. But the body takes some of the K1 and manufactures K2. Not enough for the body's needs, but it does some. So that's why they called it K2, rather than giving it a whole different name, like vitamin KM or something like that. So then menaquinone goes, and what it does is through the carboxylase cycle, it will activate proteins that vitamin D has helped build. Two classic ones are osteocalcin and matrix GLA protein. Osteocalcin is a protein made by vitamin D that's in the bone. And if it is activated, it holds calcium into it. If it is not activated, it releases calcium. So what happens if you don't have K2 in the diet to activate it? Calcium goes out of the bone and we get osteoporosis. Matrix GLA is in the blood vessels, and it's just the opposite. When you activate matrix GLA protein, it releases the calcium. So you've got, if it's not activated, you don't have enough K2, all right? Sorry. If you don't have enough K2, it opens and accepts the calcium. You do get K2, and it closes and turns the calcium back into the bones. So they're just the opposite, okay? The vitamin A, vitamin D, and K2 all work in concert. They're all fat-soluble vitamins. And high concentrations of K2, what a surprise, in the pancreas and the salivary glands. Both the glands we've been talking about. So, teeth are nourished from the inside as well. Oh, I should point out that when I found that it was the antioxidants in the brain that were controlling the hypothalamus signal, I thought, okay, well, which antioxidant is going to be the most potent for that? And I looked at green tea first, and that's when found the research on the Asian paradox, and that. And then also, why was K2 so good at preventing dental caries? So we find that K2 was, at that point, I thought, till today, I thought K2 might be the most potent brain antioxidant we have seen. In 2 years, I'm going to look for Boyd's NBMI because he may have found a more potent brain antioxidant than K2. And we may be looking at the most powerful way to prevent all dental caries when Boyd brings his NBMI out, more powerful than K2 or green tea or anything else. You heard it here first. If you've got, and Dwight mentioned to me yesterday, I got these older people that come in, they got all these root caries, and that for years they didn't have any restorations, and now they're getting root caries. Well, first thing I would do today, because it's going to be a couple of years till Boyd gets out, is start introducing K2 to these people. First of all, it will help that dentin fluid flow going. Not only that, but it's going to get the calcium out of their arteries. And it's also going to put it back into their bones. How many times are these people on drugs to help calcify their bones? And how many times do we see hardening of the arteries? So dentistry, by doing something for preventive dentistry, has a ripple effect to helping a person systemically. The flip side of that is that the most significant preventive dental things won't probably come from a dentist studying in the mouth. It's going to come from biochemists. It's going to come from neuroscientists. That's where the future of preventive dentistry is really, is, in my opinion. So teeth are always also nourished from the outside, and this has to do with pH and the composition of saliva. And you could test for this, I think, in your dental office. You can incubate saliva to see the amount of lactobacillus and the amount of strep mutans. We know that when the pH goes down, that strep mutans is the first bacteria in there. It lowers it. But then once it gets to a lower state, strep mutans runs out of gas and lactobacillus takes over to lower it even further. Well, Weston Price found in his research that when under Activator X, that lactobacillus went down. Essentially, pH was starting to rise. So you could start to do this in your dental offices, and I would suggest that one thing that could be done is when you start to collect data, if the IAOMT had a database that sort of collected everyone's data and said, we're doing this and we're noticing this, that you'd have a much larger database relative to K2 and dental caries. So about 2 years ago, the AGD published a study that said, we found that milk is non-cariogenic, and but we qualify cheese as anti-cariogenic. And they said, we think it's because you have to chew the cheese, stimulate saliva or something like that. Well, it could be, but it also could be that since K2 is manufactured by the fermentation process of bacteria, that you've got cheese as a fermented product now providing K2 into the system, so that you've got fluid flow running through the tooth, and milk as a non-fermented product not producing any change on the fluid flow through the tooth. In fact, with lactose, maybe it's providing a sugar, so it's all the same. Okay, we're going to finish a little early. So the paradigm shift in dental caries, I think, is the potential of dental teams to leverage this information and these concepts to something that will provide a more caries-free future, but you're also going to step into other people's territories. So it's, when you start to prescribe K2, you're going to notice changes in cardiovascular disease and osteoporosis, and research done in the Netherlands again on diabetes. So it obviously should affect diabetes, since it's talking about the hypothalamus of the brain and everything. So we're going to push into other fields. And other fields are going to push into dentistry. Because, for example, if a pediatrician starts recommending antioxidants and K2 to their young children, we really don't see a lot of people before age 3. Now, my grandson is 9 months old now, and my daughter she has a little spray bottle and a little spray with K2 and D3 under the tongue every day. She says, "Dad, would you like to do it too?" So, "Okay, Austin, open your mouth." Oh, right, I got it on his chin. So anyway, but he's getting his K2 and his D3 already. And of course, as a liposome spray, right under the tongue and absorbed into the system in a minimal dose, because it's not going all the way through the digestive system in order to do that. So there are things that dentistry can do in children up to age 3, but we haven't. It's been a big missing link that we have neglected. And so much can be done there, as we've learned earlier, with iodine and things like this, to make a big difference through nutrition in early childhood development. So I want to thank the International Academy of Oral Medicine and Toxicology for inviting me, and I look forward to the question and answer period. Thank you very much.